Energy vampires. Who are they? How to avoid them? And are you one of them? This is what I want to talk about today. Now, a lot of people ask me, should we avoid energy vampires? How do we identify one? And what has your experience been with energy vampires? And, obviously I've had a long history with energy vampires like everyone else. And especially myself when obviously I write books and I lecture and I take people on tours and retreats and so forth and so on. And there are obviously different personalities. And there usually is at least one energy vampire within a group, whether they know it or not. Usually other people do. So it is very common, not only in ordinary life that there are energy vampires, but also within spiritual circles, within people who actually believe that they're spiritual people or that they're becoming a better person. You'll often find that, every now and again you come across an energy vampire, whether they know it or not, unfortunately. So I want to talk about that today. I want to talk about who they are, also how to avoid them. And, in talking about who they are, then you could probably assess yourself to see maybe if you have some of those tendencies and if maybe it's time to reevaluate your behavior, because maybe that behavior might be affecting others in a negative way. When we look at energy vampires, who are they? So what are some of the traits of an energy vampire? First of all, we have to talk about narcissists. It's a no-brainer, right? So I even have a lot of friends who are teachers in the spiritual field, and they themselves, maybe they don't know it or not, but they are narcissists. They're constantly talking about themselves. They're almost mythologizing themselves. We do this a lot. A lot of people do this especially when they come across things like spirituality, because spirituality can be so grand, and we can tend to over sensationalize spirituality, especially Eastern spirituality. And a lot of people who come across that often over sensationalize themselves, mythologize themselves, and so forth and so on. But this is not isolated, obviously, to the spiritual field. We see all around the world, we discover narcissists who are so self-involved, who cannot stop talking about themselves, and it can be very taxing to be around them. I have a certain friend who's like that. I don't want to obviously mention his name. He's a good friend of mine, but he can tend to speak about himself for long periods of time. So it can be difficult to be around a narcissist. We all have friends that probably have a little bit of narcissistic tendencies, and we can probably identify some of that within ourselves as well. But that tendency is developed a lot more in some people than others, and we can't really explain why, but this narcissistic trait is one of the core traits of an energy vampire. And as we know, when you're around someone who's just constantly talking about themselves, it's hard to make the conversation veer in a different direction or turn the conversation back around to something that you're doing in your life, because usually what the narcissist does is they turn it back to something that they are going to do, that they are planning for the future, and so forth and so on. So be careful of a narcissist, because they will drain your energy. And this leads into another trait of an energy vampire, which are chronic talkers. Now, we've all experienced chronic talkers where they just constantly talk. It's like there's an internal motor somewhere here, and it's just unraveling, and you're just sitting there just like you're getting shot in the war with chat bullets, and they're just chit-chatting. They can't stop talking. And so we've probably all been around those sorts of people before. And so chronic talkers tend to deplete your energy, because, it is important to listen. But when you are listening to a chronic talkers are usually in the habit of looping their information. They constantly loop their information. So they'll tell you something, and then 2 minutes later, they're talking about the same thing, and the same thing, and the same thing, and the same thing. You're listening, and you're just getting worn out. You're worn out. Your listening also has a limit, But for some reason, chronic talkers, they don't have a limit for talking. Usually what happens is they do have a limit, but what happens is they'll talk, and then they say, oh, okay, good to see you next time, or they go to bed or whatever, you know what I mean? So that's how we experience a chronic talker. And they can really deplete your energy systems because it is an energy vampire tendency. And the problem with chronic talkers is some chronic talkers can genuinely be good people. There's no doubt about it. But they just have this terrible habit of talking for the sake of talking, to hear themselves talk, and are not mindful of the facial cues and the energy of the other people, and are just sort of taking over the conversation, the whole energy of the environment for their own sake. Maybe chronic talkers suffer from some sort of lack or inadequacy. That's why they like to talk a lot. That can also contribute to the habit of chronic talking, this feeling of being inadequate or inferior to other people. It does happen. And so a lot of chronic talkers want to talk themselves up, but over talk themselves up, if you know what I mean. That's one aspect of it. And the problem with chronic talkers is you can kind of never tell them, to shut up or to be quiet and listen to someone else, because a chronic talker usually has another trait that an energy vampire has, and that is they are constant blamers. They are blamers. They are people who don't take accountability for their actions. And so, for example, if you say to a chronic talker, hey man, look, come on, let other people talk here. You're talking too much. You're sapping the energy of the people around you. They take it the wrong way, and then they start blaming other people and so forth and so on. And so one of the main traits of an energy vampire is blamers. They constantly blame everyone else but themselves and never take accountability for their own actions. And we've probably all done this in our life, but to a lesser degree than an energy vampire, because an energy vampire develops this habit of always blaming other people and never taking accountability, and it's really it can be frustrating. It can be frustrating. We've all experienced it. For example, there are people who constantly exhibit a certain behavior which is negative and causes trouble, and everyone knows it, and they get exposed for it, but then they constantly blame someone else, or they blame something else, and they never take accountability. A classic case of this is someone who constantly does the wrong thing, but might say, oh, God has another plan for me. I'm in God's hands and this and that. So they're always passing off blame. In this sense, they're passing off blame to God, or they might pass off blame to Jesus or someone like this, but never take accountability for their own actions. And this is a terrible trait, because all you're going to do is produce more karma for yourself from the actions that you are doing. You're going to experience a more negative reality when you constantly never take accountability for your actions and always blame other people. Another energy trait kind of builds on the last three I just mentioned, and they are drama farmers. Someone who is constantly always producing or seeking drama. And we see these people a lot. There's a lot of people who are always seeking drama. I have many friends who are drama farmers. They just love drama. I don't know what they get out of it, because it's a unique psychology. It's not common, but there are people out there that they just love drama. They seek drama. They want some sort of action, some sort of stimulation, which breaks up the ordinary mundaneness of life. And I would say that you don't have to seek drama to break up the ordinary mundaneness of life. You just have to live a more interesting life. That's what you need to do. You don't have to go around seeking drama. And so you have these people who seek drama and always causing trouble or in and around trouble. Where there's trouble, you can smell it, they're there. They're there. So this is another core trait of an energy vampire. Another characteristic of an energy vampire are criticizers. People who are always criticizing everything. This is a bad habit where people will criticize just the littlest things, insignificant things, but they'll criticize certain things. And this is a terrible characteristic to have, because when you're in a habit of just criticizing everything and everyone, it's very difficult for other people to be around you, because the people that are going to be around you are going to know what to expect. They know that they can't put a foot wrong because you're going to criticize them for whatever it may be, or they'll just criticize something, completely insignificant that you may experience together. And so criticizers are definitely a characteristic of an energy vampire, and it tends to just weigh on you big time when you're around people who are constantly criticizing things. One of the other characteristics are passive aggressive people. And passive aggressiveness has kind of become a part of society. It's become a way for people to vent their anger in a subtle way. But I always tell people who are passive aggressive is, how is that contributing to healthy relationships, and how is that affecting your friendships? Because humans aren't stupid. When someone's passive aggressive, they're being passive aggressive. I mean, it's not something that is a puzzle or difficult to work out. When someone's being passive aggressive. And you see this a lot within the workplace. When I was in working environments 10 years ago, I would see a lot of passive aggressive attitude with people. And then all that happens from that is that people begin to have a deep resentment towards each other. They begin to gossip about each other. All of these traits that are not good. So we all have to reconsider when we are being passive aggressive. This is really a bad characteristic of an energy vampire, and something that will continue to sap energy from people, because it can't contribute to healthy and harmonious relationships and a healthy and harmonious society. So, when you begin to identify someone who is passive aggressive, it's best to not even engage in any deeper conversation or anything along the lines of what they're talking about, because it's not going to go nowhere, and there's only going to be more resentment, maybe towards them and maybe them towards yourself. So it's very important to identify this passive aggressive attitude within people and steer clear of it. Now, the last characteristic of an energy vampire is this chronic cynicism, like people who are constantly negative. So basically a negative person. And this chronic cynic is almost within all of us, but a lot of people have more of this trait firmly within than other people. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with cynicism or being negative. Being cynical can have its benefits in certain situations, and also being negative can have its benefits in certain situations. But to be a chronic cynic and to be constantly negative is not beneficial really for anyone. And this is usually a trait isolated to energy vampires, because they're cynical about everything. Everything that they see, they don't see in an optimistic manner. They're basically pessimists. They see everything as like fake or not authentic. And sure, we can sympathize with some of their observations. But when you paint all of humanity with that brush, that's when it becomes problematic, because that cynical attitude will not contribute to anything other than you just being a jerk, basically, being a jerk. And, people don't want to hang around jerks. They don't want to be around someone who is a chronic cynic and is always negative about everything. It's taxing on other people's energy reserves. And if you do know anyone like this, it's best to avoid them at all costs, or to engage at a very minimal level. So what can we do when we find ourselves in a situation with an energy vampire? It's easier said than done, because sometimes these circumstances will just sneak up on you, and the next minute you've realized that you're in it. You're already in it. It's too late. You're in it. You're in this conversation. You're in this experience. You're with this energy vampire. Then it comes down to how you are going to deal with it, or what are your actions going to be moving forward. First of all, my first advice is kind of simplistic, but first of all, identify them. And then once you have identified them as an energy vampire, you might even be in the midst of this conversation with them, just slow your breathing down and watch your mind, because your mind's probably agitated, ready to run away, or ready to, if they're a chronic talker, ready to tell them shut up or something like this. Don't do that, because it's only going to end badly. Because, what energy vampires are obviously good at are turning the blame on you and making themselves seem like they're the victim in the situation rather than you. This is what, a classic trait of the energy vampire. They're always the victim. Everyone else is the problem. So make sure you identify them and just breathe. Breathe deeply and watch your thoughts, watch your emotions, watch, your blood might be boiling, try to simmer that down. And then for your own health and benefit, try to end the conversation and move on. Another piece of advice I'd offer you is, it's very simplistic again, is you need to edit these energy vampires out of your life. You need to identify them, edit them out of your life, and go on, shanty, 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 peacefully, without having this energy vampire drain your energy, leaving you with nothing for the rest of the day. It takes you sometimes days. When I was younger, it would take me sometimes days to get over an energy vampire's attitude. It would really drain me because I'm more sensitive. And then I'd need days to recover from this sort of experience. And this is, I think, what we all experience when we encounter an energy vampire. So I would say, edit them out and do not feel guilty about that process. A lot of people, especially who are interested in spirituality, have too many lofty goals for themselves. Yeah, but I need to be more tolerant with them. I need to listen to them more. And even if they're a chronic talker, and they just drain your energy, then you're left with nothing. And then what happens to you is you walk away from this experience, and maybe in your family life you might snap at somebody, not because you're naturally angry or a bad person, because you've got no energy left. You're just trying to cope with the rest of the day because this energy vampire is just taken all your energy out and left you lifeless, leaving you emotionally sensitive and vulnerable. And this is what happens. This is the game we play when we want to overly engage with energy vampires. We often will begin to act in a manner that is not us. I've experienced this. I've had energy vampires drain me for days, and then I might snap emotionally in a moment. I might have lost myself. And then what happens is they turn you then into the bad guy, because they're blamers, remember, and they are the victims. It's kind of ironic. So it's better to edit them out. Don't feel guilty about it. Don't feel guilty about it. You are not going to get a gold star from the universe because you tolerated energy vampires your entire life. You're not going to get a gold star from that. The universe does not have an interpretation of good or bad. We're not living in a universe where there's a being above us judging us whether we're good or bad. That's not the way it is. So you have to just edit them out of your life and don't feel guilty about it. Go on with your life and live happily, live peacefully. So you have to make sure you identify them, and then once you identify them, edit them out, and then monitor your life in the future if there are any other energy vampires that are going to encroach on your life. So I know my advice may seem simplistic about how to deal with energy vampires, and there are a lot of woo-woo interpretations of how you should deal with energy vampires, but a lot of them are absurd. So I just wanted to be straight up with you and practical about how to deal with it. And it's very easy. It's very easy. Don't feel guilty. Edit them out. All is good. But what you have to realize from watching this today is you have to understand the characteristics of the energy vampire. But also, if something I said has resonated as something true within you, then you really have to reevaluate your own life. If you are a narcissist, you have to think, am I a narcissist? Do I talk too much? You have to be truthfully honest, because we don't really need energy vampires in this world. We need more people who can listen, more people who can work together and be more heartfelt instead of self-interested. We don't need energy vampires. And it is ironic that, as I said, you find a lot of energy vampires within the spiritual field, and which means that a lot of people are still self-interested, which is kind of paradoxical, because the idea of spirituality is to diminish the ego and to be less self-interested and to be more inclusive of the world. So it is kind of ironic that there are a lot of energy vampires within the field of spirituality. So I hope this has all helped you today, and I hope that in the future that you can identify an energy vampire a lot quicker than maybe I used to be able to identify them, and to move your life in a positive direction where only peace and tranquility are the state of the environment that you live in. Shanty, shanty, shanty.